The outdoors is a place of unmatched natural beauty. For a good part of my life, I considered it my home, and a place I could never imagine dreading. However, during the fall of 2004, I went on a quote-unquote field expedition with my college class that made me see the dark horrors that lurk in the cold shadows of the unexplored parts of the world. My sophomore year of college was the height of my college experience, as I was exploring many different career paths that included the outdoors, as well as a copious amount of recreational drugs. I had considered being a geologist since I found rocks to be interesting, and I loved to be outside. I had always collected rocks growing up, but I never cared enough to know all the names of the different rocks I had in my collection that I kept in a shoebox under my bed. I figured that taking geology would better align me with my childhood hobby and prepare me for a potential career. My geology class was a group of interesting characters that weren't exactly what you would consider to be model students. I obviously fit in well and made a good number of friends in the class. We would hang outside of class and go hiking on the weekends and get high in the mountains where we knew that no police would find us. We did have to keep our eyes open for wolves and bears and other large creatures that roamed the woods, but it wasn't anything that we weren't unprepared for. It was near the end of the semester, and my professor challenged the class to research out local mining operations and ask for samples from the company as proof. The group that provided the best sample would receive an automatic letter grade bump in their final grade, which would take me from a C to a B. I looked at my group with anticipation since we were all somewhat struggling in the class. After class, we met up as a group and went over our options. We obviously wanted to provide the best sample in order to win. We knew that going to a typical coal or iron mine wasn't going to cut it. We needed to go to a gold mine, but there'd be no way that they'd ever give us a sizable sample that would be worthwhile. Thankfully, one of the members in our group was a local to this area. He told us that there used to be a gold mine up north about 2 hours, but unfortunately, it was abandoned due to complications, whatever that means. My group was either brave or stupid enough to pick that as our mine that we were going to get our sample from. We figured that we could search the operation and see if they left anything behind that we could use. Our group had 5 people, including myself. Just for reference, my name is Sean, and the other members are Jake, Matt, Kendra, and Chelsea. Matt and Kendra were a couple, and Chelsea was just one of the guys. We decided to make a weekend of it since we'd be a good drive north. Winter was starting, but not quite full force yet. Luckily, Jake was able to talk to his parents into letting us borrow a camp trailer that weekend, so we didn't have to stay outside in tents or in someone's car. We left after class on Friday and piled into Jake's truck, which was attached to his family's camp trailer, and we took off to find our sample in this abandoned mine. We didn't really know why the mine was closed, but we assumed that it was because it wasn't producing as much as it was, or it simply just wasn't worth the trouble of mining. The mine was a good distance away from the cities, and as we drove, the more dense the trees became around us. We finally arrived at what appeared to be a small clearing in the woods and a parking lot with a dozen or so commercial trailers. We didn't check the trailers, but we assumed that they were abandoned. It was dark and rather cold, so we decided that our adventure could wait till daytime. We parked the trailer in the parking lot and got situated with sleeping arrangements. The night here was different. To be completely honest, I was quite spooked. It felt like I was in someone's territory where I shouldn't have been. The empty commercial trailers and the clearing of the woods made everyone uncomfortable. Something in the back of everyone's mind told us that there was something inhabiting them. We decided that rather than going straight to bed, that we would stay up and indulge ourselves in a smoke session with the group. The smoke session was more intense than usual. We somewhat forgot that we were out in the middle of the woods, and that we felt impending danger. As the night went on and the more we chilled, we began to hear things coming from outside. "Guys, did you hear that?" Jake said. Honestly, we were pretty baked at this point, and Jake was always the paranoid one of the group, so we told him to relax and take another hit. Not much later, I was changing the music, and we all heard something outside. We all paused since we heard what sounded like something outside trying to sneak around, without alerting anyone. It was one of those moments that really sober you up, and everyone got serious. We did our best to look outside of the trailer without having to go outside. We were not wanting to meet anyone or anything out in the woods this late at night. We figured that since no one was pounding on our trailer telling us to leave, that we would be okay for the night. Our main concern was that we would get caught with weed or trespassing by police, rather than some bear or a serial killer on the loose. We decided to call it a night with the smoking, but the noises outside continued. There came a point where something hit our trailer hard, and Jake went outside to see what it was. He scanned the parking lot with a flashlight, but he didn't seem to see anything. We all waited inside like the cowards we were, and waited for Jake to get back in the trailer, but he never did. We began to worry when Jake didn't return within a few minutes. We called for him a few times when we realized that someone would actually have to go outside and look for him. The group looked at one another without saying anything, but we all knew that someone had to go out to look for Jake. I volunteered to go, and Matt also voiced that he wanted to join me, but Kendra told him that he needed to stay with her and Chelsea. Great. Looks like I'm doing this by myself. I stepped out into the cold, dark night with a flashlight. My light seemed to be swallowed up by the surrounding darkness of the woods. I shined my light over to the commercial trailers where I figured Jake would be, but all I saw was an empty shell of what was once a busy mining company. I began walking over to the trailers slowly, hoping to catch sight of any movement, but everything looked still. The feeling of dread was much worse than before. I felt vulnerable being outside, and I felt like something was stalking me. I started walking towards the trailers, hoping to find any sign of Jake. I was about to call out Jake's name when I heard a sound coming from one of the trailers, a good distance away. I felt somewhat relieved, thinking that this noise was caused by Jake. I started walking quite quickly over to the noise, which was about 4 trailers away, when suddenly something grabbed me from behind. I was so paralyzed by fear, I didn't have the ability to swing at whatever grabbed me. Thankfully, the thing that grabbed me was Jake, and he pulled me behind one of the trailers, shushing me while doing so. "I think they can see us," he whispered. We both sat there silently, looking for any movement or listening for any sound. We didn't see any movement or anything, but I did hear what sounded like clicking coming from around us. After a few minutes of just sitting there and nothing happening, I told Jake that you're just being paranoid again. We need to get back to the trailer. He told me that he saw something, and that it ran into one of the trailers nearby. I wasn't looking to see if he was telling the truth. I told him that he's just having a bad trip, and that there was nothing out here with us. This was obviously a lie. I just wanted to get him back to the trailer quickly. We started making our way back when I heard something behind us. It was that clicking sound again, except this time it sounded so close. Against my better judgment, I decided to turn around and shine my flashlight on what was making that sound. What I saw defies my belief on what I know to be real, and to this day is the biggest reason why I don't go outside. What I saw is best described as like a golem with long teeth and pointy ears, a very flat and short nose, almost resembling a bat, minus the wings, except this creature was the size of a very large dog. The creature had very large white eyes, but I don't think it could see us. Seeing this creature caused me to be paralyzed. I quietly whispered to Jake, "Do not turn around. Keep facing our trailer." I was afraid that if he saw this thing, that he'd cause the creature to chase us. The creature kept making this clicking sound, but it kept tilting its head from side to side, as if it was trying to listen to us. Something told me that as long as we stood still, this thing couldn't find us. However, that wasn't an option for long, as Jake started to sob quietly. Thankfully, I thought on my feet and I threw my flashlight off into the woods. This creature then galloped off into the woods and away from us, and I used this opportunity to sprint back to the trailer with Jake. Once back to the trailer, I told everyone what I saw, and they all started to freak out. We decided to cut our trip short, and we left that night, leaving behind, unfortunately, our best opportunity to get a good grade. That was my last semester in college, and to this day I can't explain what I saw. I don't know what it was, and thankfully, I have yet to see one of those things again. I work as an accountant in the upstate of New York. My life is quite notoriously boring, as most accountants are. However, I am a part of a group called Urban Exploration on Facebook, where we go to different places and explore. Most of these places are abandoned, or should be at least. However, we do come across a couple of hobos every now and then. Most are pretty docile, or too drugged up to do anything. However, the story I'm about to tell you is of an instance where we came across something supernatural. The event happened when my urban exploration group wanted to go visit the Blackwell Asylum on Roosevelt Island. The asylum was on one of the islands off of New York and is infamous for being haunted. The island is not open to the public, which was part of the appeal for me. One of the group members on the urban exploration page on Facebook said that he had a boat and that he was going to go one night. Me and a half dozen of people decided to go with him. Whenever I go and explore a new place, I always think of it smart to pack a weapon. I always carry a small pistol when I go investigate. It's mainly for my anxiety, but I figured that if I ever came across someone I didn't want to meet, I'd be prepared. We all met together at 9 o'clock at the local bowling alley. From there, we carpooled over to the docks to where the boat was located. The boat wasn't very big, but it sat all of us comfortably. On the boat ride over, we were all sharing stories about this asylum. Some said that it was haunted, while others said that there was a cult there infamous for thinking that they were vampires. I find these kind of stories amusing, and part of the reason why I go on these explorations. When we finally arrived to the island, I was quite amazed to see the asylum. Despite being quite old, it was beautiful. That was one of the things I really enjoyed about this group. It got me out of my shell and took me to cool places I never would have gone to before. Unfortunately, it also opened my eyes to a harsh new reality. We docked the boat around 11 o'clock and began our exploration. Many people in our group, including myself, had GoPros. We got everything set up and we began our investigation. The main level looked like any other place I'd visit. Trash was everywhere and old remnants of the old asylum were still intact. There was graffiti on some of the walls, but that's pretty standard in most of these places. Some of the graffiti can actually be quite beautiful. We searched the main floor quite thoroughly. Thankfully at this point, we had yet to find any evidence that people were living here. However, this would change once we made our way into the basement. After about 20 minutes of being here, we found a set of stairs leading down into a basement. At the top of the basement stairs was written in spray paint, "Hell," and pointing downwards. Little did we know the spray paint was actually a warning of what we were actually going to see. We made our way down into the basement, and once we got to the bottom, and to everyone's surprise, down the hallway, there was a light on. As we made our way down the hallway, I put my hand on my pistol. The light that was down the hallway was being obscured by these plastic sheets that were hung up. I noticed that on some of these sheets were blood. Not a great sign. My group was surprisingly stealthy. None of us made a sound. That is until we made it to the room. Behind the last and final sheet was a room that had candles lit on the floor. On the floor, drawn in blood, appeared different types of symbols, some of which I recognized. But that wasn't the startling part. In this room, chained to the wall, were 4 different people. We all realized that we just stumbled across something very sinister. Some of the people were missing limbs and were quite bandaged heavily. We needed to leave now. I was not waiting around to find the people that did this. I pulled out my pistol and kept it to my side. Some of the group members wanted to stay and help the people, while everyone else wanted to leave. We then heard something coming from the back room on the other side of this room that we were in. It sounded like something was being dragged. Everyone immediately sprinted down the hallway and back up the stairs. Everyone made it out of the asylum fine, and thankfully, we didn't see any other people. We all got on the boat and took off for the mainland. Once on the mainland, we made our way to the police station and told them what we saw. The police kept us there for less than an hour, asking us questions about the asylum. I think that the police realized in the tone of our voices that we were telling the truth. After answering a couple of questions, we were free to go home. And that's exactly what I did. A couple of days later, I got a visit from one of the policemen at my work. He asked me if I had a couple of minutes to spare, and he wanted to share with me what they found. He told me that once they visited the asylum that same night, that they also found the few people chained to the wall, as well as 15 other people that were a part of a cannibalistic cult. He told me that I was lucky and that those people would have outnumbered us. He then told me something very startling, and to this day, I find quite difficult to believe. That those people chained to the wall, missing limbs, wasn't just a coincidence. The cannibalistic cult was slowly eating them, piece by piece. When I graduated college, I decided that I wanted to go backpack through Russia. I was always fascinated with their culture, and I wanted to ride their famous train across the Trans-Siberian Railway. For those of you that are unaware, the Trans-Siberian Railway is a railroad that goes across the entirety of Russia. The railway is quite cheap to ride, and me having recently graduated college was the perfect vacation since I didn't have much money. During my vacation, I would get off at some of the stops and explore for a day or two. There was one place that really stuck out to me. I forgot the name of the city, but I came across something that was quite terrifying. The town that I stopped at was quite small and was located at the center of a forest. One of the first things that I noticed about the town was that it had a massive graveyard. That was odd, I thought, which made the town a little bit more creepy. It's also important for the story to tell you that I know absolutely no Russian. As I was walking by the graveyard, I noticed something quite peculiar about some of the graves. The graves had these iron bars enclosing them. Only a few of them had the bars over the graves. I honestly had never seen anything like this before, but I figured it was only there to prevent grave robbers. I went to the local bar and with my bad translator, I ordered a beer and grabbed some dinner. It honestly wasn't that late, and the sun was still up when people started to speak loudly and leave the bar. I'd obviously had no idea what they were saying, but it was clear that everyone was leaving. I wasn't even close to being finished with my food when an old lady started shouting at me, trying to shoo me away from out of the bar. I was confused and I tried to tell her that I was still eating, when a larger man came out from behind the bar carrying a bat. I got up and I walked out of the bar before he could get close to me, and I went outside. The large man then closed the door behind me and locked it. I know that Russians have a different culture, but this was something else. I started to walk near the woods when the sun started to go down. As I was walking, I started to hear what sounded like screaming coming from the woods. My ears perked up, but I glanced over to the woods, but I couldn't see anything. The screaming was short, but I was concerned enough to go investigate. I tried to walk into the woods, but there weren't any paths anywhere. The trees and brush were too thick for me to get anywhere. I turned around and I went back to the town. The town looked completely deserted. Nothing was open. No one was driving around, and no one was outside. At this point, the sun had set, but it was still light out. I tried knocking on doors to find a place for me to stay, or at least find a taxi, but no one answered. It then dawned on me that my best opportunity to find a place to stay was for me to walk back to the train station, which was about 5 miles away. I began walking down the paved road back to the train station when the sun finally set. It was quite cold, but more importantly, it was really dark. I wasn't too far down the road, about 10 minutes or so, when I heard a weird sound. It sounded like an emergency siren going off over the town. It sounded like a World War II air raid or something. Being concerned for my safety, I decided that it was best for me to keep walking out of the town. The road was dark and was surrounded by a forest. Thankfully, my eyes had adjusted just enough to where I could see the road, but I couldn't see anything in the woods. I got about halfway down the road when I heard a scream coming not that deep from inside the woods. This caused me to jump, and I was immediately struck with fear. I then started a slight jog as I wanted to distance myself with whatever was going on in the woods. I then heard the scream again, except this time it was much closer, as if whatever it was following me. My jog turned into a full sprint when I heard movement coming from the woods nearby. I quickly glanced over to the woods to see if I could see anything, but it was too dark. I knew that whatever it was could probably see me, and I felt vulnerable. Thankfully, just down the road, I could see the light from the train station. However, there was still a good distance I'd have to travel on foot in order to get there. The sounds continued behind me, but instead of being out in the woods, it sounded like whatever it was on the road. I could hear huffing and growling as if some kind of beast was chasing me. I was literally running for my life. Considering that I was out of shape and I just jogged 5 miles, I was exhausted, but I knew that if I stopped, I would die. The growling and huffing got louder as I quickly approached the train station, but all of those sounds stopped when I reached the light of the train station. Confused by what was chasing me and why it stopped, I turned around to see what it was. I was expecting a wolf or a large bear, but to my surprise and utter horror, I saw what appeared to be an old woman. She didn't step within the light, but I could still see her. She looked mangy and feral, as if she'd been living off in the woods. To be perfectly honest, I don't think she was human. Not wanting to press my luck, I continued a slight jog to the train station, where it would be safe. Thankfully, the thing that resembled the woman didn't follow me, but went back into the woods. I don't know what to make of that experience, and I'm half tempted to go back to that town to get some answers. Why was there a siren? Why were people afraid to be out past dark? And why was that woman afraid to come into the light? I have my suspicions as to what she was, but frankly, I don't think I want the answers.